Months of exercise, grueling diets, and a whole lot of pushing jeeps. Here's how Hollywood's actresses prepared for their biggest action roles. Video game icon Lara Croft was first brought to life on the big screen by Angelina Jolie for 2001's Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Jolie played Lara 2 years later in one more movie, Lara Croft Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life, before the Tomb Raider film franchise was buried for the next 15 years. When Lara finally returned to the big screen in 2018, the role of the legendary spelunker was now played by Alicia Vikander. Vikander had definitely played action-heavy roles before this, but Tomb Raider was the first time that she had landed the main lead of a major action-adventure film. In preparing to play one of the toughest and most athletic video game characters of all time, Vikander added 12 pounds of muscle to her frame, did mixed martial arts training, and had to eat up to 5 meals a day. But she already had a leg up in terms of extreme physical discipline, as Vikander had previously been a trained ballet dancer. The Marvel Cinematic Universe finally got its first female-led superhero in 2019 with Captain Marvel. One of the most powerful characters in the MCU thus far, much of Captain Marvel's might comes from her cosmic abilities. But that's not to say she can't scrap when she needs to.
Higher, further, faster, baby.
And Brie Larson put in the work to make sure that Carol Danvers looked like someone you wouldn't want to mess with. Speaking about her physical state before filming began, she told Business Insider, "Oh my gosh, Marvel doesn't know that I don't even know how to walk up a hill without being out of breath." But she took the part seriously, telling the outlet that she'd gone far beyond what she'd ever thought possible for her body. Larson said she was eventually able to deadlift 200 pounds, hip thrust 400 pounds, and could even push a Jeep by herself. To say that the Star Wars fandom has a complicated relationship with the sequel trilogy would be a major understatement, but that shouldn't take away from the hard work carried out by the talented people who made those movies. And that goes especially for Daisy Ridley. Ridley was still pretty early in her acting career when she joined the cast of Star Wars: The Force Awakens as Rey, an orphan from the mysterious desert planet Jakku. It was a big change for sure, but she was fully prepared to start grinding like the lead of a massive movie franchise. Ridley's preparations for The Force Awakens included 5-hour-a-day workouts for 3 months, as well as fight training for the movie's action scenes. Quentin Tarantino's love of 1970s cinema was bound to lead him to the golden era of martial arts movies sooner or later. And when he finally got there with Kill Bill, he went so all in on the revenge epic that it had to be split into 2 parts. Kill Bill Volume 2 is technically the only direct sequel Tarantino has made in his entire career. And with all due respect to the efforts of the cast and crew of those movies, Uma Thurman's powerhouse performance as the bride made those films truly shine.
You and I have unfinished business.
Baby, you ain't kidding.
For this part, Thurman had the opportunity to train under legendary filmmaker and fight choreographer Yuen Woo-ping. An icon in his field, Yuen went from working with Jackie Chan back in the 1970s to helping revitalize martial arts movies around the turn of the century with The Matrix and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. For Kill Bill, he put Thurman on 40 hours a week of training for 3 months to turn her into someone who could convincingly take on an army of 88 henchmen entirely by herself. As she told IGN in 2003, "It was very empowering to make it out alive from the House of Blue Leaves with my joints semi-intact." It's not only for the movies that actresses transform their bodies. Alison Brie, who at that point was perhaps best known as nervous bookworm Annie on Community, proved that she could be so much more when she was cast as a lead in Netflix's Glow. Telling a fictionalized story based on the real-life gorgeous ladies of wrestling promotion, Brie played Ruth Zoya the Destroyer Wild, a character inspired by real Glow wrestler Laura Lynn Palmer. At the time, Brie told ET Online, "I have never considered myself an athletic person until I started working on Glow." But she added the show didn't use stunt doubles, and that she and her fellow actors really did all the things you saw on the screen. As a result, before each of the show's 3 seasons, the cast had to do a month of wrestling training to get ready. Brie's personal trainer, Jason Walsh, told Self magazine, "She's a tiny woman, not an athlete that's been doing this stuff her whole life, so we trained her like an athlete." That training paid off, with Brie eventually able to do push-ups with 50 pounds of weight on her back, as well as pick up the full weight of other people and hold them over her head. It's not often that a spin-off movie is better than the movie it was spun off from, but few would disagree that this was the case with Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn. Easily the best part of the disappointing 2016 Suicide Squad movie, Margot Robbie's take on Harley Quinn deserved much better than that movie. Luckily, Birds of Prey is still one of the best-reviewed DC Extended Universe movies. Much of that has to do with Robbie and her captivating take on one of DC's most beloved characters.
I'm telling you, if you want boys to respect you,
You have to show them that you're serious. Blow something up.
In addition to doing an amazing job at embodying Harley's personality, Robbie didn't shy away from bringing the character's physically tough side to the screen. She had already worked with ballet dancer and celebrity trainer Andy Hecker to get into fighting form for Suicide Squad, but she had a lot more screen time in Birds of Prey, so Robbie really had to double down on the workouts, diets, and overall discipline, and that's to say nothing of the roller skating. Given her scene-stealing performances in movies such as The Greatest Showman and Dune, it's easy to forget that Rebecca Ferguson's big breakout role came by way of the fifth Mission Impossible film, Rogue Nation, playing MI6 agent Ilsa Faust, who switches back and forth between hero and villain seemingly from one scene to the next. Ferguson held her own among an ever-growing and already impressive ensemble, not just in terms of character work but also fights and stunts. Speaking to Vogue about her first Mission Impossible outing, Ferguson said the training started immediately. She explained, "When I first arrived, they drove me straight from the airport to the gym. For the next month and a half, I trained for 6 hours, 5 or 6 days a week." The actor said she did most of her own stunts in the movie and had to do some of the more dangerous ones over and over again so that they could be shot from as many angles as possible. But Ferguson came back for 2 more Mission Impossible films after Rogue Nation, so it mustn't have been all bad. Just because the Deadpool movies are largely comedies doesn't mean there isn't plenty of action to be found. It also doesn't mean that the casts of those movies are only training their funny bones in preparation for their roles. This is doubly true for those members of the cast that weren't in a head-to-toe costume or entirely CG. As luck-powered superhero Domino in Deadpool 2, Zazie Beetz didn't have either to fall back on, and so she had to look the part with an outfit that left her mostly exposed. Not only did Beetz have to endure 2 months of training before filming for the anti-hero sequel even began, but she also had to squeeze in 4 hours per day, even when production got underway.
Maximum effort.
It was a big change for Beetz to go from not working out at all to having an intense daily workout routine. As she told The Hollywood Reporter, "It was a huge transition, emotionally and physically, just something I hadn't felt before." There was a time when TV productions couldn't hold a candle to Hollywood in terms of action set pieces, fights, and stunts. Over the last few decades, however, that line has become thinner, and much of that is due to HBO's Game of Thrones. Based on the popular book series by George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones had all of the budget and spectacle of even the most epic big-screen production. And for the actors who worked on the show, it felt every bit as physically demanding. Brienne of Tarth is described in the books as an extremely imposing figure, and compromising on that wasn't an option for the screen adaptation. Shortly after the series was announced, a Game of Thrones fan site immediately took to name-checking which actors should be cast in which roles, and Gwendoline Christie was brought up as the perfect person to play Brienne. That led to someone contacting her agent and bringing the role to her attention, for which she started training immediately, before the audition was even officially lined up. Christie already had the height for the part at 6 foot 3 inches, but she had to work hard to give herself the menacing build to match. It clearly paid off though, as it's impossible to imagine anyone else bringing Brienne to life. 2 years before Captain Marvel hit theaters, the DC Extended Universe had already put a female superhero front and center for 2017's Wonder Woman. Still the DCEU film with the highest Rotten Tomatoes score, Wonder Woman seemed to suggest that the DCEU had what it took to go head-to-head with the MCU. Of course, that didn't end up panning out.
They're everything you say, but so much more.
Gadot said she spent a whopping 6 months preparing for her first solo outing as Diana Prince, which included not only exercise and strength training, but also stunt choreography. Of course, it bears mentioning that before she became an actor, Gadot had spent 2 years as a combat fitness instructor in the Israel Defense Forces. Clearly, she wasn't starting from zero on a strength and fitness journey for Wonder Woman. Nevertheless, she worked and trained hard specifically to play Diana in the character's multiple film appearances. It's not always fighting that requires an actor to do intense physical training for a role. In the case of 2002's Blue Crush, it was mostly a matter of Kate Bosworth having the physique needed to play a surfer. But while actresses getting into bathing suit shape isn't especially unusual for Hollywood, it's worth highlighting here because of the way it ended up affecting women's roles in the sport of surfing. Of course, Bosworth worked very hard on that movie. She reportedly spent upwards of 7 hours a day cross-training, in what she calls the most physically demanding experience of her life. But Blue Crush and Bosworth's work in the movie are also said to have represented a change for women in the surfing culture, inspiring a generation of girls and women to get on a board and take up the sport themselves, rather than just chill on the beach and watch the boys ride the waves. Though Hilary Swank's first major film role already had her performing martial arts as a next Karate Kid, she still had to do some serious work to play tragic boxer Maggie Fitzgerald a decade later in $1 Million Baby. In fact, Swank trained so hard that, at one point, she could have died when an untreated foot blister eventually developed into a potentially fatal staph infection. If that wasn't proof that Swank was all in on becoming Maggie, her workout routine certainly was. For 6 days a week over 3 months, Swank did over 2 hours of boxing training, and then another 1 to 2 hours of weights. Though she was only asked to add 10 pounds of muscle, Swank nearly doubled that through not only her workouts, but via a very strict diet regimen. As for the actual boxing practice, Swank overachieved on that front too. Her weight trainer, Grant Roberts, told the Los Angeles Times, "Honestly, I don't know how she was standing up with all that boxing."